Hi everyone, I'm Jaimielle Jacobs from Live Your Own Health and Wellbeing, and today I'm here to show you how to make a healthy chocolate cake. It is one of our beautiful clients' birthday today, so I thought in the spirit of her birthday, happy birthday Lou, I'd be making a chocolate cake, a virtual chocolate cake to give to her. So today we are using a recipe of mine that's as healthy as it gets in terms of a chocolate cake. So we're putting in some nutrient-dense eggs. We are putting in some cocoa powder. We're using almond flour today, but you can also use normal flour at home or coconut flour. I like the almond flour because it just makes the cake a little bit more light and fluffy. We are also using some coconut cream, but again, if you want to use normal cream, that is fine. And for the chocolate, we're using some dark choc chips, and I've got about half a cup there. For the sweetener, we are using some good old raw honey from Pomona. It's about a 40-minute drive from here. So where you can, try and use really localized ingredients, support the local economy as much as possible. But I do also love the fact that it's raw honey as well. And we're going to make the cake rise because, again, we're not using self-raising flour. We are using a nut flour in the form of almond flour today. We're going to get it to rise by using some gluten-free baking powder and baking soda, but you can just use one or the other. You don't need to use both. I just like to use both just to be safe, on the safe side. So let's get started. I'm going to show you how I do this. If you want to, you can quickly run to the cupboard now if you've got the ingredients in the cupboard and do it with me. That would be great. But I will take you through and show you what I do. It literally takes about 5 minutes to prep, which is amazing, and it takes anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes to cook in the oven. So it is a real quick recipe, and it's one the kids can get involved in too. So what I do first is I put together all the wet ingredients, and then I'll put in the dry ingredients. So what I do is I just crack the eggs, and we're using 3 eggs today. Eggs are like little super food, a whole protein, and the yolk is just so nutrient dense. It's full with zinc, magnesium, choline. There's endless benefits to egg yolks, so please always try and use the egg yolks. They are the fat, the essential fatty acids in the egg, and then you've also got the protein in the white of the egg. But it's referred to as a whole protein because you've got about 7 grams of fat in the yolk, and you've got about 6 grams of protein in the white. So you just whisk it up, nice and easy. And then what I do is I put in half a cup of extra virgin olive oil. So normally in cakes you'll be using butter or olive oil. I like to use olive oil again because it just keeps it nice and fluffy, and it's a really healthy fat to have. So I'll just grab the cup. So we want to be putting in half a cup here. A lot of us are isolated at home at the moment, so it's a really good time to get the whole family involved in cooking and use it as your mindfulness well-being time. It's sort of almost like a restorative practice for me. I just love cooking. I'll often put on a cool little tune, a bit of jazz or Madeline Peru or some folk sounding music, and you just sort of, I don't even follow a recipe. I just go with the flow and intuitively cook. But today I am following my recipe, so I can give it to you after this. So we've got the olive oil, we've got the eggs in there. I'm now going to put in my honey. So it all depends how sweet you like things, but I would be putting in 2 heaped tablespoons of honey. If your family is really on the sweet tooth side, you might want to be putting in up to 4 tablespoons. But 2 tablespoons to me is fine. Keep in mind you are using dark chocolate unless you want to use some milk chocolate. If you're using milk chocolate in this recipe, it is always going to be a bit sweeter and not so bitter. So we've got the honey in there, and now we're just going to stir it all up. I keep my honey in the pantry so it's not, super solid. So you might just want to, with this recipe, either use maple syrup if that's not going to get as solid in the fridge, or just take your honey out a good hour before you want to use it. So just whisking all that up. I'm then going to put in 1/4 cup of my coconut cream. Yum. Again, if you are sensitive to coconut or you just don't like the taste, that's fine. You can just use normal thickened cream or pouring cream. That is absolutely fine. Again, there's absolutely no rules when it comes to cooking. I'm going to use a sifter now because my almond flour is a little bit lumpy, as you can see there. So I just grab my sifter and I put in 1.5 cups of almond flour, and I'm just sifting it in, and then I use my spoon just to try and get rid of the little lumps, so we can use absolutely all the ingredients that we have today. Nothing gets wasted. I'm then going to put in 1/2 cup of cocoa powder. You can also use cacao powder. I just happen to have cocoa powder in the pantry, and I'm using everything in the pantry at the moment. We're not wasting a thing. Cacao powder is always less unprocessed, so it's probably a better option if you can get it, but I'm using cocoa powder today. So I'm putting in 1/2 cup into the bowl. I'm then going to reach for my baking powder and baking soda, and that's what's going to get this cake to rise and actually look like a cake. So I'm just going to put in, actually I'll put in 2 teaspoons. With my recipes, they do change all the time. Even if I'm making the same thing, I'll often change it up and just see what I get. But yeah, today I'm using 2 tablespoons of baking powder, and I'm going to use, 2 teaspoons, and I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And again, just make sure that you don't get any lumps there, so someone doesn't eat the piece with all the baking soda in it. And you're just going to stir that, mix it so it mixes up really well. I think this is something you can get the whole family involved with, so everyone can, you know, have a step, or even get your own baking bowl, your own mixing bowl, and everyone can make a slightly different flavoured cake. So you could do this with, make a banana cake and do it with mashed up bananas as well. That would be pretty cool. So you just mix it all up. You want to see a bit of a texture just like I've got here, where it's not super runny, but it is quite thick, and it's still got some sort of nice flow to it. You don't want it to be super thick. If it's super thick, you have to add more liquid, either in the form of your olive oil or your coconut cream. Otherwise it's going to be a very, very dry cake, and no one likes a dry chocolate cake. So we just stir it up there. I then have got my baking loaf. I usually would be using, you know, a cake tin, but I want this to cook quite quickly today, so I can show you the finished result at the end of this. So all I've done is I've got my baking paper, and I'm going to line that. I love this tin. Everything cooks super quick in this tin, which is just excellent. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to pour it in. I actually did forget my, I have got 1/2 cup here of chopped chips, but what I'm going to do today is I'm going to add the chopped chips whilst we pour it in. So I'll just pour in half the mixture, and I put a hole in that baking paper, so I'm going to use that for something else later, and I'm just going to get another roll here, because I don't want anything to seep through, and I'm too lazy to actually grease the tin. So I'm putting half the mixture in there. You can actually, if you've got strawberries or raspberries or anything like figs, fresh figs, you can put them in the cake mixture right now. So I put in about half of my chopped chips, so you can see there they're quite even throughout. And then I'm going to pour the other part of my mixture in. Yum. Everyone can fight over the mixing bowl as well. If you are going to be using normal flour, everyone's got access to different food products at the moment. I'd recommend you use less, because you'll always be using quite a bit more almond flour than if you're using just normal flour. So I'd be using 3/4 of a cup to a cup instead of the 1.5 cups of the almond. And if you want to use coconut flour, feel free, but I'd be using only 1/4 of the 1.5 cups today. So make it all even there. And I'm just going to put the rest of the chopped chips on the top. And now it's ready to go into my oven. I have preheated the oven to 180 degrees today. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to keep an eye on it because it slightly changes every time I do this. It changes by a couple minutes here and there. And it's always better to have an undercooked cake that you can just let sit and rest, as opposed to having a cake that's, you know, a bit burnt on the top and it's a bit dry. And I've done that many times before. So I'm going to put this in and I'll come back and I'll show you the finished result. I'm also going to be making a icing out of coconut cream and dark chocolate and nothing else. I promise nothing else. In that's an icing. You can also eat that as a dipping chocolate as well. So we're back and we've got the yummy banana chocolate cake out of the oven. It is a chocolate birthday cake, but I am cooking it in a loaf tin today. So you just get it out of the baking tin like so, and you can see it looks pretty amazing like that. So I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to show you the icing that I've got for it today. So the icing I've just purely made out of dark chocolate. So I've put in 1 cup of dark chocolate. That can be any sort of dark chocolate that you like. I generally like to try and stick to 70% and plus, just because it has less sugar content, because it's more of the dark chocolate. And it also tastes better to me as well. Some people find it a bit bitter though, so see how you go. And I've put in 1/2 cup of coconut cream into this. If you leave it in the fridge, it will go quite solid, more solid than what your Nutella spread would go like. So if you're keen for like a hot chocolate, I would put it in the fridge, wait for it to solidify, and then put a tablespoon of that into a cup. Pour some hot water and some milk or whatever milk you like, and you've got a hot chocolate. So it's pretty versatile. So I'm going to, I've got it, it's quite warm at the moment. You can see it there. It's like a runny chocolate consistency. I would preferably leave this in the fridge for about 15 minutes, get it to go a little bit hard, and then I will put it on the cake, but I want to show you today just what it looks like. So I'm just going to pour it on over. Yum. And just going to let that sit in the middle there, like so. So that looks pretty amazing to me. If you have any raspberries or strawberries, feel free to add that.